The concept of the old crone, or the witch, has been played around with in many different genres in these modern times. From musicals to comedies to fables, the witch has been a pretty potent antagonist. In today's mighty number 3 pick, a witch is at the center of a 1,000-piece puzzle of a mystery. This is M.L. Miller Fright's Best in Horror Countdown 2024 through 2025. At number 3 is Weapons. It was released on August 8th, 2025, and is streaming on HBO Max from New Line Cinema and Warner Brothers. It's directed and written by Zach Cregger. When every child in one particular class runs off in the middle of the night, all fingers are pointed in one direction. That of their teacher, Justine, played by Julia Garner, who has no idea where the children have gone. The only child left in the class, Alex, played by Carrie Christopher, claims to not know anything about the disappearances either. This bizarre occurrence sets into motion a series of horrors unlike anything this small town has ever seen before. Zach Cregger burst out of nowhere to bring us the highly imaginative Barbarian a few years ago, and after that he became the talk of the town. There was a bidding war to produce his next film, Weapons, and anticipation was high once the vague images of kids running, their arms bizarrely out to their sides, disappearing into the night. Before I get into the review, I have to say that in terms of getting me stoked for a movie, this teaser worked in so many ways. Sure, it had a lot of creepy imagery and a foreboding tone, but it didn't throw the entire plot at you as so many trailers do today. As with Barbarian, the Weapons trailer simply gives you how the movie opens, and that's it, suggesting all hell will break loose, but never specifying what particular type of hell that is. First and foremost, and I hope someone out there cutting trailers is listening, this is the way to get people interested in your movie. And don't just listen to me. That mysterious trailer is what got so many people out to see Weapons, making it one of the surprise hits of the summer. Now, I don't pay a lot of heed to box office numbers, but I do love big-budget horror done right, mostly because it's so rarely done right. See most Blumhouse releases this year and the many, many years before that. I hope this trend of an intriguing trailer that gives nothing away will set a new trend in horror films. I doubt it. Nothing says I have little faith in my movie like a trailer that gives the entire film away. The movie, Weapons itself, I found to be pretty excellent. As with last year's Strange Darling, Cregger separates the story into overlapping chapters, in this case, focusing on one particular character, each holding back secrets that other characters and the audience are not privy to. Making a story like this is like putting together a puzzle for the audience. And Weapons never takes the audience by the hand and leads you to put this stuff together. It simply gives some information, such as with an early scene where Julia's ex, Paul, played by Alden Ehrenreich, has a bandage on his hand when she meets him in a bar, but it isn't explained why. Later, during Paul's vignette, we see what gruesome thing happens to his hand, and the payoff is so much greater having kept that under wraps when the character was introduced. This type of twisted tango with the script is what makes Weapons a film you can watch over and over again, noticing little beats hinted at early, then paid off big time later. Details that seem insignificant turn out to be a big deal, making you pay attention to the little stuff in the corners all the more. This made me laser focus on every detail in Weapons, hoping to figure out the story, yet being utterly surprised at the creative way the story unfolds. This non-linear way of storytelling not only challenges the viewer to pay attention, but it also amplifies the investment 100-fold, not unlike how many found footage horror films amplify that interest visually. So basically what films like Strange Darling and now Weapons are doing is making the narrative version of a found footage film, if you can catch what I'm drifting. It's this unpredictability that makes Weapons so much fun. Yes, there is a main threat, and I'll get to that in a bit, but the way everyone is having their own struggles in each vignette Even the shortest ones, such as the one focusing on Principal Marcus, played by Benedict Wong, or Junkie James, played by Austin Abrams, present challenges for that particular character with ties to the main plot. The genius in the script is that all of these problems fly around the major threat like moths to a flame, but like the parable of the blind man and the elephant, none of them see the major problem until it's too late. It's the way Cregger intricately places these little seeds of info into each segment, seeds that eventually give us the cause of all of these problems, is where Weapons succeeds so well. This is an amazing script above all else, one deserving to be studied on its own to understand how to reveal a mystery inch by painstaking inch. The ensemble cast is wonderful as well. I was unimpressed with Julia Garner in Wolfman, but she shows that when given the right script, she can shine. Here she plays a textured woman dealing with alcoholism and a difficulty with boundaries when it comes to her job. Two difficulties that are probably intertwined, and while we don't know the cause of them, we don't really necessarily need to since this is such an immediate story. Garner and Cregger gives us just enough to tell us that she is a flawed yet sympathetic character mixed up in all of this. The same goes for the other lead of the film, Archer, played by Josh Brolin, who is the father of one of the kids who has gone missing. Archer is not a perfect parent. He's racked with guilt when his son disappears and punishes himself for not telling his boy he loves him, even hinting that there might have been some kind of abuse going on that Archer may regret subtly wedged in there. Archer lets his rage get the better of him, and he lashes out at Justine because she's an easy, weaker target, like many abusers do. As with Garner's character, Brolin's Archer has some very bad flaws, but since the vignettes are focused on each of them, we see redeemable reasons, making them worth following as well. This can be said for most of the other cast. Benedict Wong is good as the principal, giving a professional yet compassionate performance as someone who is right in the middle of this big predicament and trying to keep things in control. Austin Adams as the Junkie James provides some great comic relief as he attempts to score his next big high and bumbles and stumbles his way into the middle of it all. The lone child left behind, Alex, is played particularly well by Carrie Christopher, a shining example of the abused child who is smart enough to know how to read the dangers of a situation and when to act and not act. Christopher's arc comes late in the game, revealing a lot of what's going on, so through most of the film, he's just this shy little kid. But once his arc arrives, it's the final piece of the puzzle linking it all together, and the little boy's performance only amplifies this revelatory segment. Finally, I have to give Alden Ehrenreich his due credit. He got a bad rap with Solo, a role that was doomed to fail no matter what he did with it. Since then, with Cocaine Bear, he was the best part of that film, by the way, and now Weapons, the guy really does show he has wonderful comic timing and an everyman feel that should make him a star. I hope the actor can shed that Solo baggage and shine as he really does provide some of the best character moments in the film, as well as undergoes some of the worst horrors one could imagine. Finally, our main antagonist, Gladys, is played excellently by Amy Madigan and is truly a new horror icon. Looking like the long-lost sister to last year's iconic killer Longlegs, or maybe some distant relative of Tiny Tim, Gladys is the stuff of nightmares, from her puckered face to her bizarre wigs. Madigan's amazingly versatile, giving a threatening performance from such a frail body. Madigan's Gladys is horrifying to look at, but she also provides some darkly funny scenes as she struggles to keep all of this chaos together as the story goes on. It's interesting to see a flawed horror villain rather than some omniscient, terrible force. That's what makes her something different and still wholly formed. Cregger definitely doesn't hold back with showing what the influences are for Weapons, and they come from such unconventional places given that this is a horror film. Magnolia seems to factor significantly with Weapons, not only the structure, but the beginning with an unnatural event occurring and then affecting the rest of the stories throughout, as well as the whole bumbling cop trying to do good thread, as John C. Reilly's character is very much the same in tone as Alden Ehrenreich's Paul. There are shades of Pulp Fiction and Prisoners in here as well regarding some key performances and terrifying use of needles, plus the whole film feels like those old evil kid films like The Children, a schlocky horror film I love so very much. And the shifting POV of the story definitely has roots leading all the way back to Rashomon. There's even a chase scene towards the end ripped right from the Huggies scene from Raising Arizona. You'll notice that all of these films Cregger references are not other horror films, but comedies, dramas, and tragedies. That should be a lesson to modern filmmakers. Don't pull simply from your genre when making a film. If you pull from another genre and then twist it to fit into the genre you prefer, the stories feel as fresh as Weapons does. So what is Weapons about? It's ethereal, but Cregger has gone on record saying that it's about the horrors of alcoholism. Seeing the substance abuse problems and family trauma used throughout Weapons makes that understandable. Seeing Alex have to go to school hiding dark secrets at home is a clear example of a child coping with alcoholic parents. Both Justine and Paul deal with alcoholism in different ways. The metaphor of the parasite, referenced to throughout the film, can be seen as a way to discuss alcoholism as a disease that drains the host dry slowly without the host really knowing it. So yeah, I can see where the theme might be seen as the lesson Weapons is trying to teach us. At the same time, Weapons seem to draw from today's headlines. The setting of the initial tragedy in a school is reminiscent of the debate parents and school teachers are having these days about when is the right time and from whom sexual education and gender studies should be taught to the children. Seeing the town hall meeting with screaming parents pointing their fingers at the school board is a picture all too familiar these days in news clips. One of my least favorite scenes in the film, the only time it feels like Cregger is holding the viewer's hand, is a dream Archer has where a giant machine gun is hovering in the air over his house. It seems to be using the metaphor to speak of school shooting and gun violence in America's youth. While these are serious issues, it definitely was the least interesting of the metaphors Cregger plays with here. I'd much rather see the gun scene as a metaphor for parental negligence, child abuse, and even parental grooming towards a dangerous path, as the metaphor does appear in Archer's dream, who is full of regret in regards to how he treated his own son. The repeated mention of parasites seem to be talking about an unseen force sneaking in and corrupting the children without anyone knowing it. This could mean a ton of things other than alcoholism, such as the influence of popular culture, parental influence, social media, and peer pressure, leading the children to do and succumb to dire circumstances. It also refers to the way Gladys was able to weed her way into the community and strike without anyone knowing it. The use of 217, which is the time Archer and Justine keep waking up at, as well as the time the kids all woke up and left their homes, seems to be an obscure reference to Room 217 in Stephen King's original novel, The Shining. The resort Kubrick filmed at for the film made him change the room number from 217 to 237 for the movie. I've also heard at meeting that it referred to the 17 kids disappearing and Justine and Archer being the only two searching for them. I don't know. And honestly, it seems like such an obscure little thing that it doesn't feel consequential to me. Maybe you have a different theory. In the end, Zach Cregger has delivered a depthily themed, intricately plotted, and fascinatingly scripted classic with Weapons. He's definitely a new force of nature in the horror genre, and I hope he stays in this genre as it needs some new titans making new kinds of horror. Weapons is definitely a crowd pleaser, referencing everything from classic cinema to its framing as a modern retelling of the Pied Piper fable. Weapons is going to be one of those films I return to again and again, and I'm sure every time I'll notice something new. I highly recommend this groundbreaking horror film that for once lived up to the hype and deserves every accolade tossed at it. You might have missed this witchy horror film when it was released last year, which makes this the perfect time for you to check it out. Worth noting is Falling Stars. It was released on October 11th, 2024, and is available on demand on Amazon Prime from XYZ Films. It's directed by Gabriel Bienczycki and Richard Karpala, and written by Richard Karpala. Three brothers, Mike, Sal, and Adam, played by Sean Duke Jr., Andrew Gabriel, and Renee Leach, respectively, live in a world where witches exist. While they are highly elusive, it's common knowledge that at the beginning of the harvest each year, people suddenly disappear without a trace. The government even acknowledges this by issuing warnings to keep people from going outside during this time, as the witches appear as falling stars before they swoop down and snatch people up. A friend of the brothers, Rob, played by Greg Papa, claims to have shot a witch and buried it out in the desert. But when the group go out to see the witch, they end up desecrating the corpse and become the targets of the witches swooping above. Falling Stars is an engrossing new take on witches by bypassing the whole "do witches exist" notion and accepting that they indeed exist. It opens the story up for all kinds of avenues to venture. It shows how, despite knowing that there are terrors swooping in the skies, people will still be pushing boundaries and break the rules simply for the reason the rules are there. The group of guys go against all warnings to see a witch up close. They could have waited until daylight or later in the season, but instead they chose to go out on the first night of the harvest and pay the ultimate price. This film speaks a lot about human nature in that as soon as a barrier or rule is made, someone's going to come along and try to work their way around it. On the technical front, this is a gorgeous film, and while most likely Falling Stars was made on a very low budget, it doesn't look like it at all. This is done with some wonderful cinematography of the barren and dark desert and some expansive views of the clear night sky full of stars. Once the witches have been described as falling stars, it makes the viewer watch the stars differently, making these starry night scenes feel dangerous and full of horrors. On top of the way the film looks like a much bigger budgeted movie, it also focuses heavily on the interactions between the characters. While there are a few monologues, most of the time it's just comfortable conversations about the situation the characters are in. The casual manner in which the cast talk about the witches above made the whole thing fascinating. This isn't a film that spoon-feeds you details. They are hidden in co-director Richard Karpala's masterful script, and while there's a blurb at the beginning of the film about the witches, you can glean all that information by the way people speak to one another, making you actually pay attention to every line so you can learn more about this bizarre situation. The cast, all unknowns, do a fantastically natural job of comfortably talking about the strange world they live in and act as if they are talking about vague things that we have grown used to, like the threat of nuclear war or a global pandemic. Everything feels natural, making the dangers above all the more terrifying. The other genius move of Falling Stars is that it shows you the witch that Rob buried in the desert, but it zooms in close, and there's never a clear establishing shot of the entire thing. There are close-ups of teeth and arms and maybe what looks like some kind of broom thing that it might be riding, but the camera never lingers on it long enough for your mind to put all of those pieces together. These scenes are reminiscent of the initial autopsy scene from John Carpenter's The Thing, where we're not exactly sure what we're looking at, but we know it's gross and scary. Director Gabriel Bienczycki and Richard Karpala prove to be master manipulators. You'll swear you see the witches, but really all we do is get the idea of the witches in our heads, and then the film rolls and all the fear these guys feel going out into the night with tons of them swarming above envelops you. On such a small budget, Falling Stars does so much in terms of instilling that fear of the unknown and building a world where darkness is real and scary. I highly recommend this ingeniously lo-fi take on witches and folk horror. I'm sure there will be those who will be frustrated that we never really see the witches flying in action, but this film fascinated me at how it was able to realize big ideas on a small budget. Falling Stars isn't an effects bonanza, but the fear it awakens is better than any effects they could show on screen. As always, feel free to agree, disagree, or how about you play along at home and give me your own picks for your own favorite movies of the year. It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown. Be sure to hit all of those pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.